Hello everybody, it is Mariah, otherwise known as Blue Moonstone, and today we are back with another Mining Mysteries video. In today's video, I'm going to be telling you just a bunch of random stories. This video doesn't really have a theme. As you might be able to tell, the world that we are working in today is different. Unfortunately, the world that the first few Mining Mysteries videos have been filmed in is gone. Basically, we're going to be starting over. So yeah, I just wanted to let you guys know that, just in case you get on and you're like, this is a little bit different, that's why. But let's get right on into this video today. I'm very excited to share these scary stories with you all. The stories prepared for Mining Mysteries may be disturbing for some viewers. Some stories may have graphic details not suitable for everyone. Viewers' discretion is advised. These stories are found on Reddit, so the legitimacy of them is unknown. It is up to you to decide whether or not you believe. Something terrorized us on our Arizona desert farm. I was 16 when this all happened. We lived in the Arizona desert back when we still lived on the farm, yet I still wonder what the hell we experienced all those years ago. It started subtly, like most things out here in the quiet hum of the Arizona desert. You live out here long enough, you get used to the strange sounds, the coyotes' evening chorus, the distant rumble of a passing train, the wind carrying dust devils across the mesa. We raised goats, grew some tough drought-resistant crops. The nearest town was a good hour's drive, which suited us just fine. The first sign was the dogs. We had 3 working dogs, loyal and fierce. Usually, they were a symphony of barks at anything that moved too close to the property line. Javelina, bobcats, even the occasional lost hiker. But a few nights back, they went from their usual boisterous alerts to a low, guttural whine that just felt different. It wasn't anger or aggression, it was pure, unadulterated fear. They huddled by the back door, tails tucked, their ears flat, staring out to the moonless blackness of the desert behind our fence. Their hackles weren't raised, they were just frozen. I've seen those dogs face down rattlesnakes and mountain lions without a flinch, but this was different. "What is it?" I murmured as my older brother and I went to check on the goats in their pens, checking to see if the fences were still intact. "Everything all right?" my brother asked, shining a flashlight ahead of me, standing up already by the fence. "Dogs are riled up," I said, simply just looking around. "Could be coyotes. We had problems with them for a few days now," he replied. I shined my heavy-duty flashlight out, but nothing, just the endless, thorny expanse of cressetone and cactus. The air was still, too still. Even the crickets seemed to quiet down. The next morning, my brother and I found tracks. Not coyote, not dog. They were vaguely canine, but too large. There was almost something off about the gait, almost bipedal in places, like whatever made them sometimes walk on 2 legs. They led right up to the perimeter fence, paused, and then veered sharply around the bush, disappearing. We thought they had belonged to wolves, but they were quite rare in these parts. Heck, seeing one of those was a miracle. We showed our dad the tracks, and he simply told us not to tell our mother, so she wouldn't have to worry much, since she had been dealing with hypertension for a while then. His face, though, confirmed the fact that they could not be wolves. Our dogs had seen wolves, and they never reacted like they did the previous night. That afternoon, while my brother and I were helping our dad fix a broken irrigation valve near the back 40, we heard it. A sound that we couldn't make sense of. It was our mother's voice. "Honey, boys, are you out here?" "Yes, Mom, we're here," my brother replied, standing still and pausing to listen. "Okay," the voice replied, closer than it should have been, almost like it was right behind the tall salt cedar bushes that were 20 feet from us. My dad walked over to the bushes. "What do you need, baby?" In silence. He pushed the bushes aside, but nothing, just dirt, the humming heat, and the slow drip of water from the leaking valve. Dad looked at us before pointing at me, who had my phone on me. "Call your mother." I quickly pulled up my phone with shaking hands and I dialed her up, waiting for her to pick up. "Yes, honey, do you need something?" Mom said. Her voice was clear and a bit annoyed. A cold tremor ran down my spine. "We thought you called us just now, out by the back field." "No," she said firm. "I haven't left the kitchen all morning. You must have misheard the wind." I ended the call before looking at my brother and my dad, who were waiting with expectant eyes. "She said she was in the kitchen all morning and never left the house," I said with a shaky voice. "How's that possible? We just heard her," my brother said. "Let's just pack up," my dad chimed in. He looked calm, but I knew he was freaked out too. "I think we're done for the day." I tried to shake it off, blaming the heat, but I know my mom's voice, and that thing that terrified me was that the voice I heard, though in an accurate mimicry, lacked a little familiar cracks and hums that she usually characterized her voice when she's talking outdoors. It wasn't too perfect, like a recording played back without the static. As the days went on, a day came when one of the sturdiest yearling bucks, a black one named Samsung, was missing. My brother and I volunteered to go look for the buck, giving our dad the free time he needed to finish up the bulb, though he let us take his rifle as a precaution because he didn't want us defenseless out there. We followed the paths that were into the ground as rock crunched beneath our boots. As we walked, it was quite hot by 11 a.m. already, with the cicadas going crazy with the heat of the sun blazing down on us. After we trekked down the path for a good 30 minutes, I started to slow down at some point and realized something was off. I couldn't see it, but I could feel eyes on us. I turned around to look, but there was nothing, just a silent breeze sifting through the bushes. Even the cicadas started to quiet down, which was unusual. "Keep up," my older brother said. He was way ahead of me. When he turned around to me, he was watching me as I sped up. "Sorry." We walked for a few more minutes before we started to hear the buzz of flies to our left off of the trail. We stopped and we listened. "You hear that?" he said, glancing back at me. "Yeah, flies." We got off the trail and rounded a large rock. What we saw still shakes me to my core. It was Samson, our goat buck, and he laid on the ground on his side. We knew he was dead because he was disemboweled and all of his guts were outside, but what disturbed me the most was how the organs were placed around its corpse in an imperfect circle. Bodily fluids were soaking the ground along with the circle of organs, and it made me gag. My brother merely touched my back. "My God," he said. "What the fuck does this?" I asked in a heavy voice. "Homeless hitchhiker maybe, but I didn't see anyone," he said, and I could see his eyes moving rapidly, trying to rationalize what he was seeing. Trying to find an explanation, any explanation. Our thoughts were cut off by the yips and cries of coyotes. We looked around, but we couldn't see anything. They sounded distant at first, but then they started to come closer. "That's our cue to leave. We need to get away from this now," my brother yelled as he grabbed me and ran. We ran down the trail, but we were caught in a circle of sounds. The cries of the coyotes sounded like they were coming from everywhere and surrounding us, like they were trying to disorient us. "Don't stop," my brother yelled, and I kept up to him as I ran for my life. We ran past two rock-like boulders on either side of the trail. Then I decided to turn and look back. A figure jumped onto one of the rocks and stood in a crouched position. Its head was locked toward us, and I knew it was watching us as we ran. The figure was wearing a fur pelt type of thing on its back, and the felt had eyes and ears of something on its head. The figure had long black hair that I could see under the pelt that it had on, and it looked to be a female from what I could see. Her fingers were gray from what I could tell, maybe an ash color or something. There was also a feather attached to one of its forearms. I saw its mouth move, and the sounds that she made were horrific. Sounds that no normal human could produce. The disorienting coyote sounds we heard were coming from her, and it was deafening. To my horror, she jumped off the rock and started to move. It moved like something that has never properly learned how to use its joints, transitioning from standing to a quadruple run in one sickening fluid motion. It was dark, a smudge against the dying light. But then it got up and started to fully sprint at us, and I screamed in terror as I saw this thing, pretending to be a woman, start to close the gap on us quickly, at a speed that was impossible. My brother reacted on instinct and yelled before firing the rifle. The thing jumped over us and ran ahead into the nearby bushes before turning to shriek at us with that horrible sound from earlier. It then took off into the bushes without rustling even one bush straw. "I hit it! Holy cow, I hit it!" my brother exclaimed in relief and panic. I snapped out of my thoughts and I saw him pointing at the ground. I looked down and I saw blood on the ground before it traveled along the ground in the direction of where the thing disappeared. The blood was strange. It looked red from an angle, but then it looked black from another. That scared me even more. Let's go, my brother said. He was roughly pulling me. We got home and told our parents everything that happened. Our mom got up and left the kitchen after we were done explaining, and our dad sighed and sat quietly. They never responded to our explanations. Only the months following that event, we moved away from the farm and sold the goats. We never go back there ever. And our parents urge us to never talk about it again, but sometimes I can't help but wonder what the hell that was. Something is taking the heads off the deer. Something odd has been happening to the deer. Someone or some individuals have been taking their heads. You would think they're only taking prize bucks to mount on their walls, not even caring about harvesting the meat. But the thing is, they're not just killing bucks, they're killing younger males and even doe. I don't entirely know the reason or motivations for this, but it's been off-putting. I'm beginning to think this isn't the work of any normal animal, but maybe of some sick and twisted person. First, let me rewind to where this began. I live a quiet life in the northern Great Lakes region. I love this place more than anywhere else on Earth. I live fairly secluded in my cozy cabin in the middle of the woods. The only way to get in is a one-track dirt trail about a mile in length, also about a mile away from my nearest neighbor. I work for the state's government in a regional office about a 45-minute commute from my home. I know this gets especially rough during the winter. It's now November here, which means it's hunting season, and hunting coincides with mating season for deer. You'll find bucks roaming around looking for a mate. This makes them especially susceptible to becoming roadkill. I've hit and killed many a deer in my life living in the woods. It's inescapable sometimes, and there's nothing you can do when you're charging 60 miles an hour and a buck appears out of nowhere from a dense thicket. There are usually at least 5 dead deer that I pass on my way to and from work each day. It began about 3 weeks ago. I was just beginning my drive home from work. I mainly drive through 2-lane country roads surrounded by dense forest, and I noticed a deer carcass was on the side of the road. Not an unusual occurrence at all with living in the deep north woods. The striking thing about it, however, was that its head was severed and missing. Now this isn't entirely unheard of. People hitting a nice sized buck and taking the head as a trophy mount, but it caught me off guard for a moment before resuming whatever I was listening to on my way home. 2 or 3 days later, I can't entirely remember, I noticed that another deer carcass with its head was missing again. This day it was closer to my house. I found it a bit odd to see yet another headless deer, but I shrugged it off as there being many large bucks in the area. Over the next week, I noticed more and more deer carcasses, each with its head severed, nearing closer and closer to where I live. Each time, the day after seeing the corpse, the headless deer is gone, only for me to spot a new deer corpse anywhere from a few hundred feet to several miles ahead. Before anyone asks, I know that it is not the same deer just getting dragged down the road by someone or some animal. The deer range in different sizes and color. Because I only passed the carcass, I never thoroughly examined them, so I've just assumed that they've all been bucks, but I'm not so sure anymore. Because I work for the state government, I speak with a lot of others from various departments and organizations. Yesterday, I got to talking with the manager in the Department of Natural Resources. His name is Greg, and I began asking him about what I've been seeing for the past week. The amount of car collisions with deer has been especially bad this year. We've seen a sharp decline in hunters over the years, and with no major natural predators for the deer, they've been becoming a problem, Greg explained to me. Have you heard many reports of any drivers taking the heads of these bucks as trophies to mount? I asked. It happens every once in a while. Usually someone not from here calls them in, super concerned about a mutilated deer by the side of the road. But so far this season, at least in our region, we've got maybe a small handful, but nothing noteworthy. I've seen a different deer carcass with its head missing almost every day for the past week, and each time it's a little ahead of the last one, I began saying. I haven't heard anything about it. Maybe when you see the next one, make a call to the department's helpline and we can keep track of it. Thanks a lot. I'll be sure to do that. It's been really weirding me out. My drive home last night began as uneventful as usual. The only unusual aspect was I spotted not a single living deer even by the tree line. It's rare not to see a living deer rocking around by the road at this time of the year. About 30 minutes into my ride home, I had just passed by a car oncoming. I turned my brights off so I didn't blind the other driver, and they did the same. After they passed me, I turned my brights on just in time to see a large buck in the middle of the road. I slammed on my brakes, getting my truck to a stop only a few feet in front of the buck. The deer just stood there, staring at me with its big brown eyes, no sign of any fear or urgency. Observing the deer, I noticed it had a jagged scar running along its hindquarters. After a few moments of stillness, I finally honked my horn, startling it into action. It darted across the next lane and into the vast darkness of the woods. This thoroughly had me on edge, with my adrenaline pumping. Luckily, though, the rest of my drive was uneventful. There wasn't even a deer carcass. In all honesty, I didn't dwell on the fact too much as I was busy focusing on not hitting a living deer since my scare just a few minutes previously. Pulling into my driveway, about 20 feet past the tree line, my approaching headlights illuminated a pair of glowing eyes. Like any normal person upon seeing the glow of eyes in the woods at night, I was briefly startled. Upon further approach, near my house, my headlights illuminated the head of a buck peering up at me from the underbrush. It was a nice 8-point buck. If I was much of a hunter, I would have pulled my rifle out of my truck and shot it, but I didn't have much interest in killing and harvesting animals. Something about it was a bit odd though. Although I could see the buck from the neck onward, it appeared a lot shorter than the size of a usual 8-point buck. Maybe it was just a short deer, or it was bending its knees. I didn't know. I'm no wildlife biologist. But the deer didn't move a muscle. It just continued to stare at me. I assumed it chose fright instead of flight. This dumbass is gonna get himself killed if he does this in front of a hunter, I thought to myself as I briskly walked into my house. Fast forward to this morning. I was leaving my house at about 6:30 a.m. In the pitch dark. I was walking the 20 feet to my car when I suddenly kicked something soft. Because I was in a hurry and walking somewhat fast, this led me to trip over whatever I had kicked, and I fell face first into the ground next to it. Scrambling to my knees to grab my phone, I shone my flashlight onto what I tripped over, and it was a deer. Its head missing. Despite the freezing weather, I immediately broke out into a dreadful sweat. My hands became clammy as I shined my flashlight on the awful sight in front of me. As I shone my flashlight from its stump to where its head used to be, to the back of the body, I noticed something familiar. It had the exact same scar as the deer I almost hit on the road last night. The one that was totally alive and moving when I saw it nearly 30 miles away from my house. Bringing my flashlight back to the stump where the head once had been, I noticed that the wound was not consistent with blade marks. The wound looked as if the flesh had been torn off the brainstem and had been snapped off the spine, which was protruding out of its neck. Suddenly, I heard a twig snap off in the tree line. I didn't even bother turning around and seeing the cause of that noise. I just made a mad dash back to my house. Once safely in my house, I took a moment to catch my breath and gather my wits before I built up enough courage to turn on my outside lights to illuminate my yard. When I finally looked into my yard, the deer was gone. What? I gasped loudly, trying to make sense of everything. There was no way my mind played a trick on me, seeing the deer in my yard. I came in contact with it, and clearly felt that it was the soft torso of an animal. Was that the same deer? I asked myself. The scar looked like the exact one I had noticed last night on the deer that I nearly hit. Regardless, I've come to the conclusion that someone or something is targeting me, killing deer, removing their heads, and placing the carcasses where they know I will see them. And now they know where I live. For all I know, they could have been watching me since they placed the deer in my yard. They may still be watching my house as I sit on my kitchen floor typing all this with the lights off. I've decided I'm going to go outside and see if I can find anything. I know this may be a stupid idea, but the sun is peeking out and I will bring one of my guns with me. I will update you guys as soon as I can, and if I don't, well, I guess you can figure out that something happened to me. No one will hear me scream if something goes wrong, but I can't sit idly by while someone or something is stalking me in my home. I think I'm losing my mind. It's now midday and I haven't gone to work. I've just been pacing around my house and periodically looking out of my windows for any sign of movement. Flashback to this morning, after the whole deer fiasco in my yard, I've finally mustered up enough courage to exit my front door. I cautiously stepped into the unknown. I had my handgun I keep in a drawer and a big flashlight with me, although it was continuing to get brighter outside by the minute. As I scanned my yard and the surrounding woods, there was nothing in my yard or around it. The deer carcass had been removed or taken. How could this happen? I thought to myself. I slowly made my way to the fateful spot where I tripped over the deer. On approaching it, I could easily see where the deer had lain, a clear spot where the grass had been pushed into a damp, cold soil. As you may guess, it was about the size of a deer. What's leaving me scratching my head as I pace around my house and taking breaks to type this out is the fact that there are no set of tracks besides mine from when I walked into the deer and subsequently toppled over it. No tracks coming from the woods in any direction. There is no indication of anything walking up to place the deer or to take it away. I have a bit of an eye for tracking as I grew up in the Great North Woods. Every season, me, my dad, and my grandfather would go out deer hunting. They imparted a thing or two about tracking various game to me. I got pretty good at it too, mainly because I was forced to go out with them. I never particularly enjoyed the process of hunting or the act of killing an animal. I'm more of a hike through the nature to read at a scenic spot kind of guy. But could something have flown to place the deer in my yard only to retrieve it later? Or maybe someone is just fucking with me and used a drone to place and then retrieve the deer from my yard? I didn't hear anything when the deer was taken back. I sound like a crazy conspiracy theorist that thinks he's being gang stalked by the government, but I just don't know what else to think. The most logical explanation is that I'm just hallucinating or perceiving my reality wrong. It's a plausible explanation. I think I'm gonna spend the weekend at my parents', who live in the city about an hour south of me. I'm gonna get going, but I'll update you if anything else happens. I'm hoping this is just a localized phenomenon and whatever it is gone before it bothers somebody else. I never made it to my parents'. I didn't even make it to the main road. As I slugged down the uneven dirt trail that leads from my house to the main road, my path was blocked. The trail was crawling with deer. Living deer, dozens upon dozens of them. They were already staring directly at me as if they were expecting my attempted escape. They remained unblinking and unmoving despite my best efforts to scare them off. I shouted, I blared my horn, I even shot my gun once in the air, all to no avail. Since night was quickly approaching, I decided to trail back to my house and hunker down for another night. I found a wider patch in the trail to allow me to turn my truck around, the deer still unmoved as their outlines disappeared behind my rearview mirror. Seeing all those deer staring at me with their soulless eyes was almost as unsettling as the deer I had tripped over this morning. It certainly wasn't an unexpected sight to me. As I rolled back into my yard, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. As I put my truck in park, I prepared myself for the dash I was going to make back to my house. I grabbed my flashlight and my gun, and right as I took the keys out of the ignition, for the last moment my headlights illuminated the forest ahead of me, and I glanced at the sight of antlers. There's no way I was going out there without knowing what was ahead of me. As I fumbled to put the keys back in the ignition, I finally got them in, and my headlights once again lit up the forest. I was greeted by the sight of a buck staring back at me about 30 feet away in some dense brush covering its body. The fur on its face was a bit patchy, and its eyes appeared to be slightly clouded in the reflection of my headlights. Contrary to what the deer on the road did, the buck darted away through the thick brush. All I could really see was the way its antlers moved as it ran away. It didn't look like it was galloping like a normal deer would. It bounced in the way that a human's head bounces when they run. Seeing all of it, I'm assuming that this was an old, sick deer that probably wouldn't survive the winter. Waiting a few moments after the ill deer ran out of vision, I grabbed my gun and my flashlight, and then I sprinted the 5 or so feet between my truck and the front door. Unfortunately, I can't park in my garage as I have the snowmobile and I have been repairing a bunch of kayaks which take up most of the space, not enough for my truck to park in. But I am now safely back in my home as I am writing this, and I have zero intention of leaving the confines of my house. I have everything locked, all of my curtains drawn, and all my exterior lights on, hopefully to ward off any intruders. I will update you tomorrow or if anything changes. A massive blizzard rolled in during the night while I was asleep. There's gotta be nearly 2 feet or more of snow. I'm snowed in, for the time being at least. There was no forecast for this. I regularly monitor the weather because living so far out in the woods, I need to plan out plowing when the snow gets heavy. Luckily, my buddy Matt owns a plowing business, so if I give him a call, I'm #1 customer priority. Unfortunately, both my Wi-Fi and my service are shoddy as hell. It took me over an hour to finally reach Matt and ask him to plow the snow off my trail. He told me the earliest he could arrive was this evening, and I told him we could stop by the bar for some food and beers afterwards to catch up. My treat, of course. He readily agreed, and I impatiently waited for his arrival and me being able to leave this wretched place that is plaguing me with deer. Matt never made it to my house. Darkness was quickly approaching and I heard nothing from Matt. Neither my texts or calls were going through. As my frustration kept building up, I remembered he has his location on Snap Maps. When I opened the app and looked at his location, it showed that he was on the trail that was leading to my house. My excitement grew as I realized salvation was finally upon me. Except his location wasn't moving. Initially, I chalked it up to bad reception, but after nearly 10 minutes of watching the maps and looking out my window, there was nothing. The map indicated that he was only a little ways down the trail from the main road. I kept repeating to myself, this can't be happening right now, as my worry kept mounting for my friend. He may have been stuck out there with God knows what. I wasn't going to leave him out there to dry, although it is entirely possible that he got stuck and hasn't been able to reach me because the cell service is even worse down that trail. Regardless, I decided to act. I bundled up in my winter gear, grabbed my rifle, a flashlight, and I departed through the woods to face whatever lay ahead of me. The approaching darkness had reached its apex as I made my way from the yard to the trailhead. Fortunately, the moon was full and there was heavy snow on the ground, which afforded me some, but not much visibility. In the night, even without my flashlight, upon entering the trail, I felt as though I was being swallowed, and in going further and further into the trail, I was going down the throat of some giant. If I was lucky, I would just be able to pass through it. If not, maybe it would devour me, or worse. The trees surrounded me on either side of the trail appeared as a solid wall. Are the trees shielding something from me, or are the trees shielding me away from something? I began to ask myself. I didn't want to find out the answer. As I continued on, I noticed how quiet it was. Nothing could be heard, no wind, no animal noises, nothing. This only added to the foreboding feeling that grew heavier within me. Scanning the surrounding woods, I couldn't make out anything in my field of vision. Finally, as I passed a curve in the trail, I spotted the faint sight of lights in the distance. As soon as I was about to take off towards the lights, I heard movement behind me. I whipped around my flashlight, scanning the woods on either side of me to find the source of the movement. Right before the forest meets the trail, I saw something. Antlers, and that same patchy face with clouded eyes I saw the day before. It was staring right at me. I couldn't see all of it, It was poking its head out from behind a tree. We both stood for a few minutes, eyes locked on each other, unblinking until it finally stepped out from the woods and onto the trail. As I finally saw its entire body, needles of fear pricked me through my entire body. It had the head of a deer. The head of a deer it had taken, I presumed now. It moved on two legs, its body the shape of a human, except it wasn't made out of flesh. It appeared to be made of wood. Its torso was the trunk of a tree. Branches acted as its limbs and bones, with twigs wrapping around the joints, acting as connective tissue. Long, sharp branches in the shape of curved wooden stakes were its clawed fingers, and it took a step towards me. I bolted, or at least I attempted to. The dozens of inches of snow severely slowed me down. I was hopping more than running, trying to clear my feet of the snow just for me to penetrate my step back into it. I heard nothing more behind me, but I dared not look. After going on like this for about 50 or so feet, my foot got caught on a root and I fell face first into the snow. I immediately flipped onto my back, grasping for my rifle, and I realized I had dropped it when I bolted away from that thing. I still had my flashlight, and illuminating where I had just run from, I could see that there was nothing. I pivoted around all sides and saw no trace of whatever that thing was. I now stood there, panting and sweating. There was no time for breaks. I had to continue on to Matt's truck, lest I wished to wait for the wooden deer thing to appear again. The truck remained unmoving. Its headlights were shining directly in front of me, inhibiting my ability to see beyond them into the truck. I rushed forward, moving as fast as my legs would take me, despite the resistance from the snow. The cold air was piercing my heaving lungs. I finally made it to the truck. I clawed my way to the driver's side, only to find that it was empty with the door wide open. There was no sign of Matt, so I started calling out his name. Matt! Matt! At this point, I knew whatever I saw earlier could hear me, and it had probably been watching me this entire time, stalking me in the shadows. I looked down to see if I could find any indication of where Matt had gone. I found footprints in the snow. It appeared the rear driver's side tire had got stuck and would not get out. There was snow that had been kicked out by the wheel behind the truck as evidence. The footprints went from the driver's door to the back to examine how bad he was stuck. From there, the tracks went straight into the woods. Based on the appearance of the tracks, he was going at a very fast pace to get away from the vehicle, away from safety. I know it was a dumb idea to blindly follow the tracks, but I was on autopilot. I don't know how far or long I had been following the trail when the tracks suddenly stopped, as if Matt had just taken off the ground. I couldn't make sense of what I was seeing. I couldn't make sense of anything that was going on. Once the tracks had ceased, I finally stopped and gauged my surroundings. Trees surrounded me on all sides. I had gone far enough to where the lights of Matt's truck were no longer visible. Even worse, when I turned around, I saw that both mine and Matt's tracks in the snow had suddenly disappeared. It wasn't like I walked from the truck out here in a straight line, because the tracks I followed weaved around the forest. I was now spinning around looking for any signs of land I could recognize or I was familiar with. Based on the amount of time and distance I walked following the tracks, it was evident I was no longer on my land. I know every nook and cranny of my land. I knew the tracks were headed mostly eastwards, but in the time from when I departed from Matt's truck to that point, the night sky filled with clouds. My vision of the stars in the night sky had vanished, and so did visibility, as it was noticeably darker outside now. Worse yet, the snow began to pelt down hard on me. From behind me, I heard the crunching of snow, and I pivoted as fast as my feet could turn me to see what was behind me. It was a lone coyote. I think we both scared each other tremendously. For a moment we were at a standstill. The coyote's eyes reflected a yellow glow, and all of a sudden the coyote began to emit a deep growl while baring its teeth, and pointed its haunches up in the air. It did not appear to be aiming its aggression at me, though, but past me. I abruptly turned around, which in the glow of my flashlight I still managed to cling to revealed nothing. From behind me, I could hear the coyote now beginning to whimper. As I turned my gaze back to it, I watched carefully as it tucked its tail between its legs and its ears down and scampered away. I had no intention of lingering to find out what the cause of the coyote's fear was, so I did the only thing that seemed rational for me to do as I was lost in the woods. I ran in the direction that the coyote fled, not in the hope that it would lead me back to civilization, but that it would guide me away from any danger. I quickly lost sight of the coyote, however, I could still hear it running through the snow and dead wood. I very soon lost track of the lone coyote, but in doing so I came upon a set of what appeared to be footprints in the snow. Boots, by the look of it. What disturbed me about them, though, is that they just began out of nowhere, as if whatever it was had suddenly materialized in a physical form and just began walking, leaving prints in the snow. Having no other options, I decided to follow these tracks now. It felt as if though I was on some wild goose chase, just following any set of tracks I could. By this point, I had all but entirely stopped calling Matt's name. After following the tracks some distance, I was beginning to lose hope that I'd find my way back home. I might be out here all night, or at least until the sky cleared up. The snow was falling in chunks rather than snowflakes, and the temperature was rapidly declining. I didn't know if I'd be able to survive the night out in the woods. There was some being made of wood and severed deer heads and the elements out here against me. I didn't particularly like those odds. I began to quicken my pace following the tracks, worried that they would become covered by snow or simply vanish like the other ones. But suddenly I spotted what appeared to be some kind of opening in the woods. As I erupted through the tree line, I found that I was now in my backyard. Examining my surroundings, I saw that footprints led all the way to my house where the front door stood open, not a single light on. I decided to slick back into the edge of the tree line and stalk my way around the perimeter about 30 feet to my storage shed where I still had some old hunting rifles that I would hope would still function. Which leads me to where I am now. I am frantically writing this with numbed fingers while considering my next course of action. Me being the dumbass that I am, I forgot to bring my truck keys from the counter when I decided to trek into the unknown in search of my friend. I can either attempt to flee on foot, stick to the trail, and attempt to hail down anyone who may happen to drive down the road, or I can go into my house, retrieve my truck keys as quickly as possible, hoping not to find out whatever made its way into my house. My best chance would be to attempt to drive around Matt's vehicle that is stuck in the snow. I don't know for certain if there's enough space for me to make it past my truck, but I think it's worth a shot. Alright everybody, that's going to be it for me today. I hope you guys enjoyed these scary stories. If you did, make sure you like and subscribe so I keep making them. Remember, there will be a brand new Mining Mysteries video out every Monday, so make sure you come back next week to see what I have in store for you. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I will see you in the next one. Goodbye!